That's what's called the rule. And the rule is just, well, it's kind of a ridiculous thing they do. It decides if you can debate or not and all this other stuff. And it's just a big hoax is what it is. And I'm kind of tired of all that stuff. I'd rather we just put the bill on the floor like they do in the state legislature and vote it up or down. But Congress is a different deal. They got a show to put on. So we're voting on the rule, and we don't have the votes for the rule, and I'm working on, and I hadn't voted yet. I left my vote blank up there on the count. And the speaker came back and his people came back and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm just waiting." I said, "We need 2 more votes besides mine, and I think I can help you pick them up. I'm just going to not vote." And it was about 2:15 in the morning. So I go over to the side room to talk to the speaker, and he said, "Well, what do they need, Burchett?" And I said, "Here's what they, generally a lot of times folks will need something kind of minor. They get snubbed. They want a meeting with the president. They need a little love on a little project somewhere, and you can usually get it worked out pretty easy." And I told him what was going on, and he said, "I think that's doable." And he said, "Let me call the president." So he calls the president, and we get it working. And I'm walking back to my seat, and I call it center's row. It's second row from the back. It's where everybody, if you ever see anybody sitting back there, dadgummit, they're usually in trouble. And because I don't care. One time, one of my friends got in trouble in Congress, and I was sitting back there with him, and I said, and literally, I talked to him about his problems, and I talked to him about Jesus. And I was, it's a good time to console folks, give a witness to them a little bit. And I walked out, and a lady asked me, she said, "What were you talking to so-and-so about?" And I said, "Well, I was talking to him about his problems." It was Matt Gaetz, actually. And I said, and I was talking to him about Jesus. And then what I didn't know, it was like People Magazine or Newsweek. It was some huge big news. It might have been Wall Street Journal. I'm not sure. But anyway, it was a big article the next day. And, it was talking about Burchett, talking to him about his problems and talking to him about Jesus. And Matt comes up to me, oh, he's madder than a wet hen. And he said, "Burchett, man, would you tell those people that?" And I said, "Well, Matt, I was talking to you about Jesus." And he said, "Oh, never. I wasn't worried about that. You just never tell them I have problems." And I said, "Well, all right." So I learned my lesson. But anyway, so we're back in there, and I'm going back to center's row, and I look down at my phone, and it was like I said, it was about 2:15 or 2:30 in the morning, and I didn't recognize the number, and I answered it, and he said, "Tim," he said, "it's Charlie." And see, my brother and my dad's dead, but my brother's still alive, and he said, "It's Charlie." And I looked down at the phone, and I said, "Charlie who?" And he said, "Charlie Kirk." And I said, "Oh, hey, Charlie, what's going on?" And we'd been friends for a while. And he said, "Man, I thought you were MAGA. What are you doing? What are you doing?" And I said, "Dude, I'm working my plan." And I always thought about that. And I explained to him what was going on, and he appreciated it. And he said, and I said to him, I said, "Aren't you talking to the speaker? Aren't you talking to the president?" He goes, "No, man, I'm watching it on C-SPAN like all of America is." And I said, "Well, I'm working my plan." And then he said, the last thing he said to me is, "We're going to come back, when I come back to Washington in a couple of weeks, let's go eat supper." And I said, "That'd be great." And of course, he ended up getting assassinated. But I always thought about that time, and you young people especially, listen to this, about the plan. Charlie had a plan, and ultimately his plan was with Jesus Christ, and that's who he's with right now. So I would encourage you all to stick with that plan over any other plan you have in your life.
Yeah.
And y'all got that one for free because that wasn't in my notes. I did see